So the North Texas Panhandle is one of our favorite spots to hunt.
McWhorter Custom Rifles presents
Good shots just don't get old. 500, that's a dead deer. Welcome back, folks. This week, Blondie and I are headed to one of our favorite destinations, the Panhandle of North Texas, right around Canadian. Our good friend Dane Drake, Legends of the Cimarron Outfitters. The Texas bucks are just starting to rut out there. You don't want to miss this.
Precision Hunting TV is brought to you by McWhorter Custom Rifles, McMillan Fiberglass Stocks, Swarovski Optique, Hornady Ammunition, and Borden Accuracy.
So the North Texas Panhandle is one of our favorite spots to hunt. Denise and I have been hunting there for about 3 years now. And it's just it's a great place. It's overlooked. When people think of Texas, they generally think of South Texas and the dark horn, smaller bodied deer. These deer in the Panhandle are really big bodied deer for the most part. Some have really dark racks, some have light racks. They're not really homogeneous like the South Texas deer. Really big deer live in that river bottom up and down the Canadian River. One of my favorite places to hunt. The ranch that we hunt here is a real expansive place. It's a lot of sand hills, a lot of breaks, a lot of draws. The centerpiece of this is a huge irrigated alfalfa field, 130 acres of irrigated hay. They usually take 2 or 3 cuts off of it a year. It's the main diet of all the deer in that area. It draws deer from the river, it draws deer from the sand hills. So when we're hunting this place, everything kind of focuses around this big irrigated alfalfa food source. The way we hunt this place is when we get there, we usually get there a day or so early. We do some driving, we look at early in the mornings and late in the afternoons, we spot a lot of deer. But we already know what the central draw is going to be, this alfalfa field. So there's been long time established trails coming in several areas to this alfalfa field, so that's usually where I'm looking for a blind setup. I'm looking at the weather forecast, trying to see what the prevailing wind direction is going to be the next day, and usually we set up a north wind and a south wind blind.
Canadian Texas is one of my favorite places to go. It's up in the northern part of the state in the Panhandle, and I've been going up there quite a few years now. These deer will travel long distances out of the hills to make it to this alfalfa field. They've got a big pivot on it, and when the sun starts going down, they start pouring out of the hills like fire ants. We get to Canadian, and Allan always sets up his own blinds. That's what he does best. And we had one set up on one side of the field for a morning set and one for the afternoon. And Allan and I could both hunt this big field and see totally different deer.
We have made it to Canadian, Texas, which is pretty far north in Texas, almost into Oklahoma. And we've got some pretty warm temperatures in the 70s right now, and really strong winds, which wind is something we always have to deal with in Texas. But I believe we've got a cold front coming through here in the next couple of days. Right now we've got gusts up to 40 miles an hour. We've got a a nice pop-up blind put out, just hoping it holds so that until we can maybe see something this evening. Got the 6.5 PRC ready to roll. My quarter rifle has not let me down yet. But sitting out on the edge of a giant alfalfa field. It's been one of my favorite places to hunt up here in Canadian for several years now. So we'll see what shows up.
Our first afternoon set, and we had a whitetail buck that was bedded down 20 yards from us or 30 yards from the blind, and he never got up until he was ready to get up and go to eat. But that was really cool. The sun was going down and we're sitting there watching that buck kind of nibble around right in front of us. The rest of the evening set, we had small bucks, few does, and they came from behind us all directions. We have our ozonics set up and running in the blind, so really our scent is not a factor, no matter the wind.
This segment is brought to you by Borden Accuracy, makers of the most accurate custom hunting actions on the market. Manufactured in the USA to true bench rest tolerances. Borden Accuracy equals success.
The next morning we set up next to the equipment building, which was not far from where we had hunted the afternoon before. And we had deer just walking through the hay bales, and we even had one just banging around and hoofing at the bucket of a tractor. I don't know what had been in the bucket of that tractor, but he liked it. He was just banging his antlers around on it. Day 3, our afternoon set, we're looking out at the alfalfa field, and I had a buck that came directly across from us into the field, and I was very interested in him. Though our camera guy held me back. He said, "I don't think he's what you think he is," but I still kept my eyes on him, and he got down in a dip in this giant alfalfa field and couldn't even get a look at him most of the time. The next morning was super cold. I think it was 19 degrees, and we sat up by the equipment shed again. We had our regulars, does, and small bucks that had come out in the field, and later in the morning we had a couple of big hogs that came out at 1,000 yards, and they headed straight over to Allan's side.
Denise is sitting across from me about 1,000 yards, and I'm in this blind trying to self-film, and I get a text from Darren and Denise that I've got two huge hogs coming my way, and they're below the sight line, and when I see them come over finally, I see what they're talking about, and one of them's a tank. When they get out there about 350 yards, I'm able to put that 7 SPRC to work.
Well, I didn't kill no big buck this morning, but I sure killed a big hog.
Well, we got about a 300 plus pound black menace here that wanted to test the Hornady bullets this morning, so that 175 ELDX and this 7 SPRC just ate his lunch. He stopped out here at 356. Morning was about over, so we put the smack down on him, and he dropped in his tracks. So this is one more hog that doesn't dig up the farmer's fields and eat all my daggum corn. So that's what you get. If your buddies come back this evening, that's what they gonna get.
Our 4th afternoon, we had a wind change, so we got on a knob on the east side of the field in a ground blind. We had a lot of does, smaller bucks, and then we had a nice 8-point that showed up. Right at last light, 180 degrees from where I had been looking, our big 8 shows up and he's rubbing his antlers on the fence post. Camera guy and I had a quick huddle, and in order for me to get a clear shot at this deer, we had to move everything in the blind, including our chairs, because cameraman was sitting on a bucket and that wasn't going to work for me shooting my rifle. With all the hustle and bustle of moving everything in the blind, and I'm not all that quiet, y'all, I'm not very graceful, but we got there, and I got settled back down into a chair. This is where everything goes a little crazy.
Precision Hunting TV is also brought to you by Rack 'em Up Roasted Feeds, Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue, Surge Pro by Biofac Crop Care, Armageddon Gear, Gun Foam, Metal Spinning Targets, and Mesquite Creek Taxidermy.
Welcome back, folks. Today we're going to talk about scope choices, and basically we're going to talk about MOA versus mill and first and second focal point.
Right. So with like we all have our preferences, and like the MOA versus mill, it's just a unit of measurement. They can both be accurate at any given distance. They're still going to adjust, still get you that shooting solution, but there are some pros and cons to it. Like in the military, like I use mills all the time, so I'm really familiar with it. But like here in the U.S., everybody uses inches and yards, and it translates really easy. But there's also some other benefits to MOA, and I know you enjoy the.
I like second focal plane for the simple reason I usually use 18-20 power scope, right. And the stadia lines, the image is going to be the same regardless of what power you're on. Right. That being said, if I'm shooting at something even as close as 200 yards, I'm gonna have it on full power, so my stadia lines are always
right. So like
graduation.
And like in the class I covered the con with the second focal plane is that when you're shooting at really long distances, you may be looking through 1,000 yards of mirage, right. And you have to back down the zoom, and that's going to change the value between the stadia lines. But you need to know that. That's where this practice comes in, and like you really have to know your equipment and how it functions.
And that's one of the reasons that I usually use an 18 or 20 power scope instead of a 25 or 28 or even 32 power.
Sometimes max zoom, like a heavy zoom will hurt you at long range. It can. So like with the mills, like in a first focal plane, the benefit of it is that I'm able to make adjustments to my zoom. That reticle is going to shrink or grow depending on which way I'm going on my zoom. But the values between the stadia lines are always going to stay the same. I don't have to overthink and do too much. And like the distances that I shoot, first focal plane works out for me, and it really does. Now, back when they first started focal plane, like the reticles were really thick, because like when you went down and zoom, you had to be able to still see the reticle. Right. But when you zoom in all the way, you're covering up a lot of your target area. Second focal plane, like the lines are staying nice and thin, and like it doesn't cover up that much of the target area.
Let's talk about MOA. One MOA it's basically 1 inch at 100 yards, 1.047.
Right, and with mills, like when you go into mills, 1 mil is going to be 3.63 inches at 100 yards, and they break it down in tenths, so that's going to be 0.363 at 100 yards. Now that seems like a harsher movement, right. But it's intended for meters. Whenever you go to meters, it's going to correlate and be a lot more like perceived accuracy, and like it'll make more sense to you as far as how it lines up.
A lot of PRS guys use it because it's quicker to dial.
Yeah, it's a harsher moving system, so you can dial up for further, faster. Like so they have to engage like 6, 8 targets, in a 2-minute time frame. So they need that rapid adjustment to get there quicker versus, like MOA, where it's a smaller movement, it's more refined, so it's going to be a lot more accurate for what we're doing.
Right. Both of them have their attributes and a few negatives, but I'm a second focal plane guy. I think you are too.
Yeah, I'm second and first. I use all of them depending on where I'm going to hunt at. And I probably have way too many scopes. No such thing.
No such thing.
But so like in the future, what we're basically getting at is like we're bringing this to you, and we want you guys to think about this and choose what works for you. What are you most comfortable with? They both work at long range. They both work for accuracy. It's just a matter of what gives you the most confidence.
Right, second focal plane. That's your true precision tip, brought to you by Allan and Keith and McWhorter Custom Rifles.
Precision Hunting TV is also brought to you by McWhorter True Precision Long Range Hunting and Shooting School, Tacticam, Leo Photo USA, Sig Sauer, Trigger Tech, Brux Barrels, and Hawkins Precision. This segment is brought to you by Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue, real Texas barbecue.
I get settled in, I get my eyes on a big buck. The camera guy has a big buck in the camera. We thought we were looking at the same buck. That's where we were wrong. I squeeze the trigger, I see the buck drop in my scope. I sit back about to celebrate, and my camera guy says, "You missed him." And I'm like, "No way, I watched him drop." He looks back in the camera and he said, "He's still standing there." And I said, "No, he's not." That is when we discovered that we were not looking at the same buck. As many years as I've been doing this, it can happen. If you got this many deer that you're looking at, you've got all this stuff going on in the blind, it can happen, and it did.
Well, Denise made another perfect shot. Unfortunately, she shot the wrong buck, but in this case, it's not a bad thing.
No harm done with
this. This is
this.
a 5-plus-year-old deer. He's a tank. I mean, for out here, he's a giant body. And we were just talking about earlier about there are a whole lot of cull bucks that needed to be shot, and this is a cull buck. I heard the shot. He was right at last light, and not the trophy sheet came out to North Texas that they do have out here. Let's get him tagged and get him in the truck, and let's go eat because I'm hungry.
Let's do it.
Morning of day 5 rolls around. Denise has shot her deer, and so she was through. So Darren and I, we decided to slip back into our main blind on the east fence line. So we get in there about an hour before daylight. We slip in, nothing knew we were there. So we're sitting there pretty good, got the wind in our face. And as the light starts coming up, we start seeing bodies all over the place. There were deer everywhere. There were deer at the feeder. There were deer in the alfalfa field. We just tried to start putting horns on these deer with our Swarovski binos. It's pretty much towards the end of the hunt, and the big 9 that I'd been seeing all week was at the feeder. Long tines, really good mass. He had broken one brow tine off, had another brow tine, wasn't very long, but other than that, he was a really big trophy deer. I didn't want to shoot him in amongst those. He started chasing a deer, walked away from the feeder, and then it was just waiting for him to get broadside. Good shot. Well, that's North Texas. That's a wrap. That's the big 9. Oh, what a pretty buck. What a pretty buck. What a nice buck. Long beams, good mass. That's what got him killed right there. And he's what we thought he was. He's a 5-year-old. He pulled off and started chasing that doe and got out in this little meadow about 350, and we had a pretty strong quarter and right wind, and held a little over a minute right, and we hit him perfect. He went down in his track. Doesn't get any better than that. What a great North Texas buck. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for letting me chase these magnificent animals. For this hunt, I was using our 7 SPRC, which is a 6.5 PRC necked up to 7mm. One of my favorite calibers that we've done all time. It was built on a board and action with a 26-inch Brux barrel straight fluted, a peak stock with olive and tan obsession camo with exposed carbon. The Cerakote was flat dark earth, a TriggerTech diamond trigger set at a pound, Hawkins brake, rings, and bottom metal. For glass on this one, I was using the Swarovski X5i in a 3.5 to 18 by 50 with a 4WXI reticle. I had a flatline ox articulating level on this one, and I was shooting the Hornady 175 ELDX bullet at right around 3,000 feet per second. I was using our Leofoto tripod rest system and an Armageddon bag. Another great adventure in North Texas. Denise shot a really good deer, although it wasn't the one that she wanted to shoot. I shot a really good, mature, heavy antlered deer. We let a lot of good young deer go. Can't wait till next year.